Traoré's daily schedule had private study marked every Wednesday from 15 Norin to 18 Nor. Presidential assistants never scheduled appointments during these hours. Security protocol restricted all access to the palace's west wing during these 3 hours. What the public didn't know was that during this time, he was examining the world's most dangerous information in a secret room equipped with modern technology, located in what was once the wine cellar of the former colonial governor's palace. The first time Colonel Amara Kanate had been shown the room, he had expected something grandiose, perhaps a space befitting the conspiratorial. Whispers that circulated among palace staff about the mysterious red door at the end of the West Wing service corridor. The reality was both more mundane and more extraordinary. The door itself was unremarkable. Solid oak, painted a deep burgundy that had faded to a rusty red over decades, with a simple brass handle and an advanced electronic lock discreetly retrofitted into the ancient frame. It looked like 100 other doors in the sprawling colonial-era palace that now served as Burkina Faso's seat of government. What lay beyond, however, was anything but ordinary. You understand? President Ibrahim Traoré had told him. That first day, what I'm about to show you exists in absolute secrecy. Only 3 people currently know of this room. Myself, Minister Euro, and Dr. Sankara. You will be the 4th. Kanate, who had served as Traoré's head of security since the young military leader had assumed power, had nodded solemnly. As a career military intelligence officer, he understood the value of secrecy, especially in a country where foreign powers had long maneuvered to maintain control through information advantage. The president had placed his palm against a section of wall beside the door that appeared identical to the surrounding plaster. A soft blue light had briefly illuminated his hand, followed by a nearly inaudible click as the electronic lock disengaged. Biometric security. Traoré had explained, retrofitted by our own engineers, not foreign contractors. The technology is simple but effective and impossible to access remotely. The door had opened to reveal a narrow staircase descending below the palace foundations. The steps were old stone, worn smooth by centuries of use, but the lighting was modern recessed LED fixtures that activated automatically as they descended. At the bottom, another security system, this one requiring both retinal scanning and a numeric code guarded the entrance to what had clearly once been the colonial governor's private wine cellar. The space beyond, however, bore no resemblance to its original purpose. The room Kanate entered was approximately 60 square meters, its stone walls now lined with acoustic dampening materials and thermal insulation. The central feature was a circular table surrounded by 4 chairs, above which hung a sophisticated holographic projection system. Along one wall stood a row of advanced computer workstations, while another held physical filing systems old-fashioned but secure against electronic surveillance or hacking. Most striking was the far wall, which displayed a massive digital map of Africa overlaid with pulsing indicators, data points, and connection lines that shifted and updated in real time. Welcome, Traoré had said, to what we call simply the archive. Now, 6 months later, Colonel Kanate descended those same stairs for his weekly briefing, the memory of that first visit still vivid. Each Wednesday, he joined the president and the other 2 authorized personnel, Foreign Minister Ouedraogo and Aminata Sankara, the brilliant young historian who had first discovered the documents that led to the creation of this facility. The transformation of this ancient wine cellar into a high-tech intelligence center had been accomplished with remarkable secrecy. Rather than bringing in foreign contractors who might have ties to Western intelligence services, Traoré had assembled a small team of trusted Burkina engineers. They had worked during a carefully orchestrated structural renovation of the Tidua Palace, a project that provided cover for the extensive modifications needed. Most ingenious was the power and data infrastructure, completely independent from the palace's main systems. The archive had its own power generation, air handling, and communications capabilities, making it functionally a self-contained facility within the larger structure. This independence ensured that no unusual patterns in power consumption or data traffic would betray its existence. As Canet entered, he found the other three already present. Traore stood studying the digital map while Dr. Sankara worked at one of the computer stations. Minister Ouedraogo sat at the central table reviewing physical documents. Colonel Canet acknowledged him with a nod. You're just in time. Dr. Sankara has made a breakthrough in the Marseille archives. Dr. Sankara, no relation to Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader assassinated in 1987, though she had been named in his honor, turned from her workstation. At 32, she was younger than most high-level government advisors, but her expertise in colonial-era documentation and digital archaeology had made her invaluable to Traore's project. I've managed to decrypt another section of the directive files, she said, activating the holographic display above the central table. These documents date from 1978 to 1982, the transitional period when physical resource control was being converted to financial control mechanisms. The holographic display showed scanned images of documents bearing the letterheads of various Western financial institutions, government departments, and corporations. Sections of text were highlighted, connections between documents illustrated with glowing lines. The Resource Continuity Directive, Minister Ouedraogo explained for Canet's benefit, was the classified Western strategy to maintain control of African resources after formal decolonization. Phase 1 was direct colonial control. Phase 2 was the installation of compliant governments. Phase 3, which these documents detail, was the creation of financial structures that would ensure continued resource extraction regardless of who governed. Canet studied the documents with growing understanding. Though he had been briefed on the archive's purpose months ago, each weekly session revealed new layers to what President Traore had called the longest-running conspiracy in modern history. The archive itself had begun with a discovery made by Dr. Sankara 3 years earlier. While researching colonial land ownership records in France's National Archives, she had stumbled upon a misfiled document, a partial index referencing something called the Resource Continuity Directive. Her attempts to access the reference materials had been blocked, officially categorized as state security matters, despite being colonial-era documents that should have been declassified decades ago. Rather than accepting this obstruction, she had brought her discovery to Ibrahim Traoré, then a rising military officer known for his nationalist views. He had immediately grasped the significance of what she had found: potential documentary evidence of the systematic mechanisms designed to maintain Western control of African resources after formal independence. What had begun as a historical research project had transformed into something far more significant after Traore came to power. Using diplomatic channels, intelligence operations, hacking, and a network of sympathetic archivists across Europe and America, they had gradually assembled what amounted to the secret blueprint of neo-colonial control. The breakthrough is here, Dr. Sankara said, enlarging a specific document. This 1981 memo from the French Ministry of Finance to the Bank for International Settlements outlines the creation of what they called sovereign debt management protocols for former colonies. She highlighted specific passages, ensuring that mineral export revenues remain committed to debt service regardless of governmental changes, and currency mechanisms that preclude independent monetary policy while maintaining the appearance of sovereignty. Asterisk. This validates what we've long suspected, Traore said, his voice measured despite the explosive nature of the information. The CFA franc system and the associated debt structures weren't just economic policy. They were deliberately designed as control mechanisms to replace direct colonization. Minister Ouedraogo nodded grimly, and it explains why every African leader who has attempted to exit these systems has faced either coup attempts, assassination, or economic warfare, including Thomas Sankara, Dr. Sankara added quietly. The name hung in the air. Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader had been assassinated in 1987 after implementing policies that challenged French economic control, including questioning the debt structure imposed on African nations and attempting to create independent development pathways. Asterisk. What's most significant about this new material, Dr. Sankara continued, is that it explicitly mentions mineral resources that weren't commercially exploited at the time, including rare earth elements that have become crucial for modern technology. Asterisk. She pulled up another document, this one from a mining consortium. Asterisk. They knew about these deposits in the 1970s, decades before they were officially discovered. The strategy was to deliberately delay exploitation until the debt control systems were firmly established. Asterisk. Colonel Kennedy absorbed this information, connecting it to military intelligence he had gathered over his career. Asterisk. This explains patterns we've observed but could never fully document. Why certain exploration licenses were delayed, why specific leaders were targeted for removal. Asterisk. Exactly, Traore said. This isn't just historical research. It's actionable intelligence that explains the present and allows us to predict how they'll respond to our resource sovereignty initiatives. Asterisk. He turned to the large digital map, which now displayed pulsing indicators across multiple African nations. Asterisk. These represent the current pressure points, nations where resource control is being contested, leaders facing destabilization, financial mechanisms being deployed against sovereignty movements. Asterisk. The map was a sobering visualization of ongoing neo-colonial control, not through direct military occupation, but through financial systems, strategic corruption, and targeted intervention. Asterisk. We've mapped approximately 60% of the directive's implementation structure, Dr. Sankara reported, enough to understand the system and identify vulnerabilities. Asterisk. And to share with trusted partners, Minister Ouedraogo added, indicating a section of the map where several West African nations were highlighted in green. Asterisk. Leaders who have been brought into the archive network. Asterisk. This had been perhaps Traore's most significant strategic decision regarding the archive, controlled sharing of its contents with selected African leaders who had demonstrated genuine commitment to resource sovereignty. Not through public disclosure, which would merely prompt denials and disinformation, but through discreet briefings that provided these leaders with the informational leverage needed to counter external control attempts. Asterisk. Mali and Niger have already used archive intelligence to renegotiate mining contracts, Traore noted. Asterisk. Guinea is implementing the financial countermeasures we developed based on the banking documents. Asterisk. Colonel Kennedy studied the map with professional appreciation. What they had created here, hidden behind the unassuming red door, was essentially an intelligence operations center focused on a single mission, documenting and countering the systems of resource extraction that had kept Africa impoverished despite its natural wealth. Asterisk. Today's priority, Traore continued, is preparing the briefing package for President Godi of Mali. French financial institutions are preparing to implement Directive Protocol 37B, against his government following the announcement of the new gold export regulations. The debt market manipulation strategy, Minister Arago clarified. We've documented how it was deployed against Ghana in 2011 and Zambia precisely. But this time they'll be implementing it against a government that knows it's coming and has prepared countermeasures. Traore allowed himself a small smile. The effectiveness of these control systems depends on their invisibility. Once documented and anticipated, they can be neutralized. For the next 2 hours, the small team worked methodically analyzing documents, updating the surveillance map, preparing briefing materials, and discussing countermeasures for anticipated control attempts. The work was meticulous and often technical, involving financial regulations, resource contracts, and diplomatic leverage points. As they worked, Colonel Canet reflected on the extraordinary nature of what they were doing. The archive represented something unprecedented in post-colonial Africa, a systematic effort to document and counter the very mechanisms designed to perpetuate external control while maintaining the illusion of independence. Most revolutionary of all was the approach, not public denunciations or ideological declarations, but quiet, methodical intelligence work that gave African leaders the informational advantage they had long been denied. Traore circled a holographic display, studying a particularly complex network of financial institutions and corporate entities that functioned as intermediaries in mineral export arrangements. The pattern is consistent across multiple countries, he observed. Financial mechanisms structured to ensure revenue diversion regardless of the contract terms negotiated by national governments. Dr. Sankara nodded. What's remarkable is how standardized these systems are. The same models implemented in different resource sectors, different countries, by different colonial powers. It suggests coordination at a level beyond individual governments or corporations. The Bank for International Settlements, Minister Arago suggested. These documents repeatedly reference Basel protocols for resource-backed financial instruments, which would explain why attempts to renegotiate with individual Western governments or corporations have historically failed. The control systems transcend national borders, Traore added. They're embedded in the international financial architecture itself. This realization had profound implications for resource sovereignty efforts. African nations couldn't simply renegotiate with former colonial powers, they needed to address the structural elements of the global financial system that had been deliberately designed to maintain resource extraction pathways. There's something else, Dr. Sankara said as their session neared its conclusion. I've identified what appears to be a secondary archive in Switzerland private banking documents, related to what they called Special Resource Acquisition Funds from Anne. She displayed an index document showing hundreds of transaction records. These would document the financial incentives provided to specific African officials who facilitated continued resource access after independence. The compliance payments, Minister Arago said. We've seen references to them in other documents, but never the actual records. Can you access them? Traore asked. Dr. Sankara hesitated. Possibly, but not remotely. The records are in physical form, stored in a private vault facility in Geneva. Someone would need to access them directly. The implications hung in the air. Such an operation would extend their activities beyond digital research and into something approaching espionage. I have contacts in Geneva, Colonel Kennedy said carefully. People who might be able to help with such access discreetly. Traore considered this. Prepare a feasibility assessment, Colonel. No action without my explicit approval.